You're listening to Soundside. I'm Libby Dankman. And at the start of every week, I sit down with another journalist to talk about the top stories happening right now in the Pacific Northwest and how it affects us here in Washington. We call it Front Page. And today's guest for Front Page is Mike Carter, a senior reporter on the Law and Justice team at the Seattle Times. He covers police accountability. Mike, thank you so much for being here. First time I've gotten a chance to talk to you on the show. I really appreciate your time today.
It's nice to be here. Thanks, Libby.
So we are going to turn to our top story now, more on the fires in Spokane.
We're here today to discuss really the worst natural disaster our region has faced, the Spokane complex of fires.
So you just heard from Paige Browning about what's happening in Spokane at this hour. 700 structures burned over the weekend. The Spokesman Review reports that Incident Commander Tom Clamo said it will likely be days before it's known exactly how many homes were lost. When we say structures, that doesn't necessarily mean 700 homes. Spokane Fire said as of Sunday afternoon there were no reports of lives lost, but based on radio traffic, they anticipated that could change. Spokane Fire Chief Lance Dahl said Saturday, there is not a fire department in the United States that could handle a wind-driven event of this size. Basically, the conditions were so extreme in Spokane. As Paige said, evacuation orders are still in effect. Mike, I mean, this is just an ongoing, unfolding, horrible situation for the people of Spokane. Our fire season has already been very bad. What are you watching for, and what stands out to you about what's happening right now involving the Spokane fire specifically?
It's just been tragic. It's hard to wrap your arms around how massive this has been. Every year it seems to get a little bit worse. We had a lot of fires last year. It doesn't compare to what's happening out there this year and up in Spokane.
Yeah, just seeing something in a urban area like this, the video from KXLY reporter who drove through the Indian Trails neighborhood and seeing those just fireplaces that remain. It's mostly fireplaces and streetlights that are there and foundations of homes, but everything else burned to the ground. Governor Ferguson has declared a statewide wildfire emergency. There are resources on their way from FEMA. I do want to note that fire officials are asking people to stop flying drones over the fire in Spokane because, according to KUOW in Spokane, they have had an unprecedented number of drones over this fire, which disrupts air response for the firefighters who are trying to drop that fire suppressant over the city. Finally, if you do want to help people affected by these fires, the city of Spokane has organized a portal to help direct resources to people in need and away from scammers. That is being organized under the city's Home Starts Here Fund. And if you go to SpokaneCity.org, there is a link on the homepage in order to donate. Always in the wake of these disasters, Mike, you want to make sure you're sending the money somewhere that it's actually going to make a difference.
Of course. So. It looks like Southern California.
It
does. Just phenomenal.
Yeah, the Altadena fire from 2025 was one where I knew people who lost their homes, and it looks very similar to that Eaton fire in Altadena. Moving on, because we have so many big stories to get to today, to our second story on Front Page.
I will be looking for someone who can navigate the inevitable criticism that comes with this job, and who can course correct with grace when needed.
That's Seattle Mayor Katie Wilson on Friday talking about the search for a new chief of police. Axios reports that former Chief Sean Barnes will receive about $560,000 as part of a resignation agreement with the city. Andre Sales is now interim chief of SPD. Mayor Wilson said Friday she had asked Barnes to step down. She cited, quote, multiple factors, and said important information related to the deadly Bite of Seattle shooting should have been shared earlier. Mike, Wilson has faced growing criticism about her handling of the chief's exit, mostly coming from members of Seattle media, your own editorial board, which is obviously separate from the journalists who report like yourself, for folks who might not know that off the top of their heads. There's just so many angles here. I mean, there's the politics of it. There's the public safety angle. There's the crisis communications aspect. I'd love to hear your perspective on how this has all unfolded since the shooting last Sunday. to today and what we understand about what exactly has gone down here.
Well, it's been a spectacle. I haven't heard anyone who has praised the mayor for what happened last week. There's a lot of people. I think we saw some very prominent members of the African American community who feel that Sean Barnes was thrown under the bus. I've never seen a police chief fired in quite this manner before. Certainly, some have been asked to leave, but essentially, Sean Barnes was given the ultimatum that he either resign or he'd be fired. We've got a new chief, Andre Sales, who's very much respected in the department, but there are a number of people who wonder whether, while we start looking for a new chief, whether we'd ever be able to bring another chief in here, given circumstances that occurred last week. It's kind of hard to fathom whether somebody from outside would want to take this job. Having an outside chief has been a goal. We've seen issues with internal promotions. The last two chiefs were internal promotions, and both of them had certain problems.
Adrian Diaz and Carmen Best.
Mm-hmm. The last chief we had last any period of time was Kathleen O'Toole, who came from Boston.
And she was really supposed to oversee that consent decree that the SPD was under, and did a lot of work on that. Now she's in Chicago, I believe.
Yes.
And, this is going to be a nationwide search, according to what the mayor has said she plans. But like you say, when something has been seemingly so unpredictable and many critical voices saying that the chief had been scapegoated here, who wants to come into this environment right now?
That's a good question to ask. I was speaking to Bob Kettle, the head of the Public Safety Committee of the City Council, and he doesn't seem to think that we could find an outside chief to come in. The council, of course, has been very critical of the mayor. There is a certain amount of anger there. There's been a lot of tension between the council and the mayor, and this certainly hasn't helped. We've got a new chief, Andre Sales. Again, he's very well respected within the department. There's no indication whether or not he's going to apply for the job.
But he also came with Chief Barnes from Madison, and also doesn't, he has family elsewhere. He is also expected to travel. If one of the reasons, and we don't really have, I feel like, a very specific explanation of why Chief Barnes was asked to resign, but if one of the reasons was this reported extensive travel schedule, will Sales be any different?
Well, and that's an interesting point. Chief Barnes came under tremendous scrutiny for his travel. He had been to Chicago, where he has a house. He'd been back there 4 times this year. When Chief Sales was introduced to us last week, Chief Sales said he has a home in Chicago or in Illinois as well, and he said he planned to go back there every 8 weeks, which is essentially 6 times a year. The other thing is when Chief Barnes was here, he kept an apartment in Seattle. Chief Sales does not live in Seattle. He lives on the east side. There's a lot of irony here. Sales was the first person that Chief Barnes brought in as he replaced the old command staff. It's quite an interesting situation. I'm not quite sure how it's going to play out.
How long have you been covering the Seattle Police Department, Mike?
Well, I've been at Seattle Times for 27 years, and a good part of that, on and off, has been with the Seattle Police Department. I've seen chiefs come and go.
And this is unusual in your estimation?
Extremely.
So Barnes said in an open letter on Friday, basically, that he's proud of the work he's done in Seattle. He added, "What I did not expect was how quickly misinformation would replace facts." He cited false narratives about his commitment to the city, his presence, other things. He said that some of that had reached his wife and kids and that they had actually received threats. before we move on, Mike, what about this investigation into the shooting that happened that killed 3 people just over a week ago at Bite of Seattle? At this point, the 15-year-old has been charged, but that's with first-degree assault and second-degree unlawful possession of a firearm. Investigators do not believe that 15-year-old's gun is the one that shot the bullets that killed at least the bystanders at the scene. Do you expect this leadership turnover in the department to affect the investigation into this public safety crisis?
I think it's a distraction. You've got some experienced homicide detectives, obviously, who are running the investigation. And I don't think that a change in leadership is necessarily going to impact the work that they're doing. But at the same time, there are significant issues that they have to face. For instance, for one thing, again, the weapon used by the 15-year-old ballistically was not matched to any of the bullets that were taken from the victims. Secondly, there were 4 guns found at the scene. They have potentially identified one other person, not by name, but simply by the clothing that they were wearing.
A blue shirt.
A blue shirt that may have been involved in this. The other shooters disappeared into the crowd, and I don't know whether any of your listeners have watched the very brief body camera video that Seattle police put up last week. But it was a melee. It was a stampede, and it'd be very difficult for law enforcement to track an individual through that, particularly because there weren't a lot of cameras there. They obviously collected some video from some phone video, some video, I think, from some cameras that were there. But it's
private businesses,
that sort of thing. But I don't really get the feeling that they have any real idea of who the other individuals were, other than a vague description. The crime scene was trampled.
Yeah, hundreds of people fleeing for their lives.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's a very, very difficult investigation.
Well, we are going to be continuing to follow this, obviously, both the investigation, the search for additional suspects, and what happens with the search for the next police chief. In the meantime, you're listening to Soundside on KUOW. With me right now is Mike Carter, who is a reporter with the Seattle Times, who covers public safety, law and justice at the Seattle Times. And we're moving on to our third story on Front Page. And that is the story that you published last week, Mike, about Leon Davis. He went to the hospital with alcohol withdrawal syndrome. Just a couple of days later, Leon ended up dead on the floor. He is a black man. He died after being restrained by multiple police officers and hospital personnel. And Mike, I wonder if you can just take us to St. Francis Hospital in Federal Way on March 14th and what you have reported out happened that day and what led to Leon being dead.
Yes, this is a tragic story, and it got lost a little bit in the shuffle last week due to the police chief and what was going on at Seattle Center. But what happened was a young man, 27-year-old Leon Davis, was suffering from alcohol withdrawal, and he checked himself into the hospital on a Thursday, asking for some help. He was there for 2 days, and on the third day, he started suffering what I think most people understand to be delirium tremens. It's a very common side effect of alcohol withdrawal. It involves agitation. Sometimes it involves hallucination. It's to be expected in these sorts of cases. I've seen this
firsthand. A close family member who went through this at a hospital, alcohol withdrawal. And they were speaking to people who weren't there. Right.
And that was happening with Leon Davis on the third day that he was there. The hospital personnel became concerned. He left his room. He wouldn't return to his room. He was talking about jumping out a window. The nurses became concerned, and they called hospital security. Hospital security showed up, and they tackled Leon Davis and put him on the ground. And then they called the police. Federal Way responded with 8 police officers, and they basically dogpiled Leon. They put him on the ground. He had an officer on each leg, an officer on each arm, an officer pushing down on his back, another officer pushing down on his face, sort of grinding his face into the linoleum. I've watched body camera video from this. It's a very hard watch. They put Leon in handcuffs, held him on his belly. Leon was a big man. He was 5'10", weighed 430 plus pounds.
They put a spit hood on him.
Put a spit hood on him because they were concerned he might bite or spit at them. It was tight. And they left him there on his stomach for 25 minutes. And he died. And the medical examiner determined that the cause of death was compression from being left restrained in a prone position. This is exactly the same cause of death that we saw in the Manny Ellis case, in the George Floyd case. It's well known to law enforcement and has been known since 1995 or before that restraining people in a prone position can cause asphyxiation. It can cause heart attacks, which is what happened to Leon Davis.
Cardiac arrest,
he had a heart attack. What's really disturbing about this is it happened in a hospital. It happened within yards of the intensive care unit, and it happened while doctors and nurses watched, and they did nothing about it. It's truly tragic. I've never seen, it's one of the most preventable and tragic police-related deaths I think I've ever seen.
And I can't emphasize enough, when you read Mike Carter's story about Leon Davis, the quotes that you bring from Leon in his final minutes when he is saying, "I can't breathe." At one point he asks something along the lines of, "I don't know what you want from me."
Right.
And he seems confused, scared. Medical personnel watching, and again, 8 people restraining him, something like that. There's even conversation about turning him on his side, which would have been safer, but that doesn't happen.
And that's what's supposed to happen. You're supposed to, as soon as you get them restrained, an individual restrained, it's okay to put them prone, put them on their belly while you're restraining them, getting them in handcuffs, making sure that they're safe. But as soon as you've got them restrained, you're supposed to roll them on their side or sit them up.
And really quickly, just because we have a couple minutes left, what are the laws around that prone hold by police now? Because as you say, after Manny Ellis, after George Floyd, guidelines and laws around the ways that police can restrain a suspect have changed.
Yes, it's allowed and it's taught at the academy. But what they teach you is, again, once you've got somebody restrained and they're on their belly, you're supposed to move them into a safe position. The Attorney General's guidelines, policy guidelines for this say that you're not supposed to leave people on their stomach. You're not supposed to put them in a spit hood if they are bleeding from their mouth or from their nose. And there was a significant amount of blood on the floor when after the law enforcement sort of ground Leon Davis's face into the floor. The medical examiner found that there were significant contusions and bruises and injuries to his face and back and head.
Again, somebody who checked himself into the hospital for alcohol withdrawal, knew something was wrong. But as you say, his sister said he, a couple days later wanted to check himself out because he felt like something was off.
Right.
What is the family saying, and what are you hearing from Virginia Mason or Federal Way Police?
Well, neither the police department nor the hospital would comment to me. The case is being investigated by the Valley Independent Investigative Team, which is being run right now by the Port of Seattle Police Department. And I expect that the investigation to be turned over to the prosecuting attorney's office in the near future. Meantime, the family has retained lawyers. And I think they're moving forward probably with a lawsuit.
Yeah. Again, the family of Leon Davis, Mike Carter's story is in the Seattle Times. It's a difficult read. It is something, again, that you may have had all that stuff in your news feed about everything going on at the bite, and then with the mayor's office and the police chief. If you missed this story, it is worth a read. In the Seattle Times, the story of Leon Davis and what his family are still waiting for, which is answers. Why he ended up dead just a couple days after checking himself into a hospital, St. Francis Hospital in Federal Way on March 14th. Mike Carter with the Seattle Times, it's been such a pleasure to have you here for the first time on Soundside and talk through all these stories. There's just really urgent things happening that people should know about in the news right now in our region. And I thank you for helping to inform everybody.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for listening to Soundside. Don't forget you can listen live on KUOW 94.9 FM Seattle at noon and 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, or anytime online at KUOW.org or on your favorite podcast app.